Okay, so today we're going to be talking about putting personalities on robots. And yes, you can even do this with the little robots that you're building in ENEL 300 this semester and a little Parallax Sports. And I'll probably get the students in next year's version of this class to do this based on the projects that you're coming up with. So they're going to kind of build upon what you've been doing. So we're going to talk about like a quantitative theory of what personalities are so we can program them on the robots. Talk about verifying this model to make sure that it's actually correct. We don't want to be anything that's super wrong. We want to have a computer model of personalities. In other words, has to be all computational. And I'm going to verify the computer model by running some simulations and predicting things about people. And then I'm going to talk about how we could create little robots with human-like personalities. So I am challenging kind of the current way people think about these things, because often people are very judgmental now and they're like, I know there's something wrong with your brain. It doesn't work like mine does. That means it's wrong. But this is very subjective and arbitrary kind of way to evaluate other people, but we do it a lot. So I'm suggesting there's a totally different way to think about other people. That's I acknowledge there's nothing wrong with you, and your brain works differently than mine only because we have different personalities, and that's totally fine. And I'm going to be very engineering-ish about this, and I'm going to define it with a graph, so we can get a magnitude and a phase for a personality and a shape, which will be an ellipse. So I'm going to challenge also the way current academics think about these things, and we're supposed to have scientific type thinking, especially in universities, and usually we don't. So people get very uncomfortable if you're suggesting a theory that's based on different assumptions than they have right now. They say, no, you can't do that. But actually in science, you can do that. You can have valid scientific models as long as they make predictions and they're testable, and then you can test them and verify that they meet some real world predictions, that you can talk about things in the real world and predict them consistently. Therefore, your model has validity. Engineering models, we have a similar kind of concept. Engineering models allow us to do something useful, like design things on a computer before we do them in the real world, and the computer model is good enough that they actually end up working as expected in the real world. So I will be talking about kind of scientific models and engineering models a bit in this presentation, because they are slightly different. So when I specifically talk about putting personality in a robot, then I want an engineering model, because I want to predict that it's going to actually work on the robot, and I don't have to worry too much if it accurately predicts how a human would behave. So this whole thing is based on this graph where we have 4 axes, and on the far right I'm going to put manipulative. So this is a graph of self-images. So the opposite of manipulative is going to be empowering. So this is a self-image of whether we are manipulative or we are empowering, and how we're getting things done, how we're influencing other people. On the other graph axis, I'm going to put emotion and logic. So emotion is kind of self-explanatory, but by logic, I'm going to mean deductive logic. So it doesn't matter what your belief system is. Beliefs can't be logical or illogical. Everybody thinks that, but it's not true. If you read a textbook, you'll find out that beliefs can be consistent or inconsistent. So you build logic based on a set of beliefs or assumptions, and then your logic is either valid or invalid. That means if 2 people have 2 different sets of beliefs, they can both do valid logical deductions based on their beliefs. They can come up to different conclusions and disagree with each other, but both can be being perfectly logical. So not many people believe that, but this is what you're supposed to learn in school, that logic does not mean you agree with someone else. So just because you don't agree with someone, don't accuse them of being illogical. They might just have different beliefs, and that's okay. So this is kind of my own journey. If I was going to graph myself on this graph of self-images, I would say a long time ago I started off in this kind of balance. So I included kind of all 4 elements of my self-image. It was pretty well balanced. It was a bit down in this lower left quadrant, which is a particular personality, as we'll see later on in the presentation. At some point I kind of started drifting off and becoming unbalanced, and I didn't know why or what was going on with me. Eventually my psychiatrist told me, you have psychotic delusions of being a woman, not a helpful thing to tell a transgender woman. So, didn't get any help in that zone, probably made things much worse. So it did kind of drift off into this far left quadrant of being extremely unbalanced. So a lot of this personal experience of what my self-images were during this time let me kind of develop this theory. And then, wonderful, accept the new me, become totally balanced again, enjoy life, it's a good thing. So the whole idea here is that close to the middle of this graph, you're going to get personalities, but if you go away from the center, you're going to get personality disorders. So I kind of drew a circle here that would kind of differentiate between whether you're worried about your personality or your mental health or not. So inside the circle, you wouldn't worry about yourself. So in the far lower right-hand corner, we get personality disorders like narcissistic and antisocial that are very manipulative. So I put the visible characteristic on that axis to indicate these people are manipulative. Now on the other axis for this quadrant, I put the word hidden. So it's actually pretty hidden that they're logical. So you don't actually see that, but that's an important part of their self-image. So if we go up to the borderline in histrionic personality disorders, everybody sees them as emotional, so that's why I put visible. Hidden is their manipulative characteristic. They try and keep that hidden from other people, although other people do kind of notice that. Dependent and avoidant personality disorders are very empowering in the sense that they give all their power away. Avoid other people, so that kind of empowers them. They don't have any power over them. Dependent want to become totally powerless and have someone have power over them. So that's kind of a visible thing. The hidden is that they're emotional. In the lower right quadrant here, we have schizoid and schizotypal. And so everybody sees they're logical, okay? They don't get accused of being logical because everybody says, oh, well, they're just speaking weird theories, it's all gibberish. But remember, just because you have a unique set of beliefs doesn't mean you can't be logical. So these people might have a very unique set of beliefs that nobody else shares, but they could be doing perfectly logical deductions, at least in their own mind anyway. They can think of themselves as perfectly logical based on this unique belief system. So we're thinking of them as being logic when they're coming up with their theories. And the hidden characteristic is that they're empowering. So I drew one with this long ellipse in the lower right-hand corner to show that all the logic is kind of visible, but it's narrow in that direction of the empowerment. So everyone has a bias against one of these, depending on what quadrant you're in. So this is going to make everyone feel uncomfortable, so this is the theory that nobody likes. So depending on your personality, you're going to have a bias against one of logic, manipulation, emotion, or empowerment. So it may make you feel uncomfortable when you first see the graph. So sometimes we like to go around accusing other people of being crazy. You're crazy, you're insane, because we don't like the way people are talking, the way they're thinking, their behavior. So in the lower left, you might say someone's a mad scientist or a zany professor or something like that. In the lower right, you might accuse someone of being a sociopath. And the upper right, you might call someone a hysterical woman. And the upper left, well, this is kind of a person who might say, oh, they're a psychology student, but they're just studying to solve their own problems. So these are kind of very condescending terms we use for other people just so that we can convey how much contempt we have for them, right? But when you get really close to the center, then you get these kind of personalities. So there's a bunch of 4-color personality theories out there. This one called Lowry Colors maps to this quadrant system. So in this quadrant system, you have green being the thinker type personality. They like the logic. That's how it maps to the lower left quadrant, because the logic is the visible characteristic. Orange are the drivers. They really like to get things done, especially being in charge of other people. So that's kind of where the manipulation comes in. They like to take charge and be the leader. Blue are the friendly personality types. They like emotions to develop relationships with people. And the gold personality types are the people who like to plan. And so their visible characteristic is the empowerment. So they really like to plan in order to create empowering systems for people. So they may like rules, but the idea is to have a set of rules where people feel safe and they can operate inside that set of rules in a way that empowers them, because they can basically feel that they can accomplish anything what they want, but they do have these kind of safe boundaries. So if we lay it all out on a graph here, we kind of get this complete theory for personalities and how they work and how they can be quantified. So the idea is you can count up these things in someone's speech or someone's writings and actually plot them on the graph. So I'm going to talk about another theory now of personality theory called the Enneagram. So how many people have heard of the Enneagram? So one person. So we have 9 personality types in the Enneagram. So I'm going to think of these as self-images. They aren't necessarily described right now as self-images, but it is really hard or impossible to tell someone's Enneagram type from the outside. Someone always has to tell you what their Enneagram type is. So it's not a behavior personality theory. And they're developed through deep one-on-one conversations with people, so this is not something coming out of psychology, this is something coming out of the religious communities, communities where people have kind of healing workshops or therapeutic relationships with each other, and you kind of have these deep one-on-one conversations where people aren't necessarily taking this role of practitioner-patient, whereas people more come at these conversations through more friendly type one-on-one equal kind of relationships. So there's lots of titles on Amazon. It's very popular. There's over 1,000 titles. You can easily find an Enneagram workshop in your neighborhood. They're all over the place. It's a very popular method of self-discovery, self-growth, self-reflection in North America at the moment. So what I'm going to do to map it onto the quadrant system is to change the position of 3 of these personality types. So the 1, the 4, and the 8 got switched. And that is so they fit into this quadrant system. So this makes it consistent with these hidden invisible characteristics. It's going to make it consistent with the Lowry colors. It's going to make a nice direction of integration, which I didn't mention the last time, but that was the arrows on the last graph. And it makes a consistent direction of comfort. So everything looks a lot nicer when these get rearranged. So this direction of integration is going to be counterclockwise on the graph for these particular personality types. And the direction of integration in the Enneagram is where you move when you become mentally healthy in a long-term style of thinking. So over your lifetime, as you become more healthy, then you're going to move towards this direction of integration, not through multiple types, but you move towards the next type. So you kind of take on the characteristics of the next personality type in that direction of integration. So if you're an 8, like a challenger protector, good example, you might feel like an Elon Musk type of person. You like to argue and confront and be in charge of things. As you become healthy, over your lifetime, you'll take on a lot of the characteristics of the 2. So that is your direction of integration. The 2 is someone who feels like a Mother Teresa, likes to be a helper type person. And then when the 2 gets healthy, they move towards the 4, the individualist, someone who feels like Edgar Allan Poe, a tortured artist, tortured poet, a unique individual who can't be classified in any kind of system like this. So they would probably walk out of the room right now if they saw this because they don't like to be classified. Type 1 is feeling like a Martha Stewart, so someone who likes to be organized. That healthy direction from the 1 is towards the 7, someone who's an enthusiast, someone like feels like a Robin Williams, likes to entertain the crowd and be energetic. And then the healthy direction from that is the 5. The 5 is the observer, the thinker, the person who thinks of themselves like a Bill Gates, very logical person. They might be a self kind of professor. And then the 9, 3, and the 6 are on kind of a different track. They're kind of independent. So you move from the 3 to the 6 when you become healthy, and the 3 is this achiever, motivator person. Feels like probably one of the research professors in SSE, people who like to be successful and like to get honor and like to get awards, often type 3 personalities. And moving towards the 6 when they become healthy, you become the loyalist or the skeptical person, someone who feels like an Art Garfunkel. That might be a little bit dated with you people, but the loyal sidekick, you know, the Robin to the Batman. I don't know. Think of your sidekicks in the superheroes. And then going healthy, you get towards the 9, which is the Wayne, I feel like a Wayne Gretzky, someone who's like a mediator, someone who's a peacemaker. So this 3, 6, 9, I didn't change that from the original configuration of the Enneagram. That changed. It stayed the same. So you get this total Enneagram diagram now with the directions of integration for all the personality types on there, with the Lowry colors. And there's also this other idea of a direction of comforts. This is a direction that you want to go in your conscious mind, so the personality type you're kind of jealous of. Like, I want to go in this direction so I can be more like them, because I think the grass is greener over there. And so with this new configuration of the Enneagram, this direction of comfort is all in this continuous counterclockwise direction, so it looks very nice now. I'm going to map this to another personality theory. This is called the Merrill-Capps personality theory. Capps stands for the different personality types. The C is going to be the controllers, which I'm also going to call the crusaders, the types 1 and 8. And this is basically how you're perceived. And he's talking specifically about the workplace. So he's talking about management styles and workplace environments. And so the 1s and the 8s are actually perceived by other people to be very similar. So I'm not necessarily talking about behavior here, because I'm also, it includes a bit of behavior, but it also includes speech and writing and just unconscious communications, facial expressions, body language, everything. So how someone perceives you. So 1s and 8s come across very similarly. 7s and 3s come across very similarly as promoters. So they're the P and the Caps, and I will call them inspirers, so a little bit different word. The S is the supporters, which I'll call the doers. Those are the 6s and the 2s. They come across very similarly. And the 5s and the 4s are called analyzers in the theory. That's the A. I'll call them dreamers, because that's a little bit more accurate when you include the 4s. But again, these people come across as kind of very similar to other people. So other people might only experience kind of 4 personalities if you're looking at the quadrants. So you notice I'm ignoring the type 9 personality, the Enneagram. So I'm basically going to ignore the type 9 for the rest of this presentation. They're not in a quadrant. They're a little bit more mysterious. The quadrant personalities are much easier to deal with and understand. This personality type of the 9 being on the vertical axis, it's a little bit tricky, so it's a little bit mysterious. I'm just going to forget about it and kind of assume there's only 8 for the rest of this presentation. Now the controllers and the promoters are actually quite influencing, or they come across as influencing anyway, or they come across like they're trying to be influencing, whereas the supporters and the analyzers, they're more on the idea of being reflective. So they come across that they're more reflective and they think about things, and they're kind of absorbing information rather than trying to be pushy on people. So these are just the way they come across, and I will come back to these types way later in the presentation, but I'm just bringing them up now so you can see. So basically we have 3 personality theories mapped on the same graph with the clinical personality disorder. So we have 4 kind of disparate ideas of human personality types all mapped onto the same grid. So now the challenge is to prove this. Can we actually validate this and verify that this has some reality? So what I'm going to do is talk about analyzing written text. So you can just take people's writings and classify them into one of these 4 things and plot them on the graph. Not everyone's going to enjoy being plotted on the graph, but I'm going to do it to people anyway. I'm going to go through some Google pages where we can look at people's biases as based on, the number 1 page of Google. You might think that's the most accurate information. I'm thinking more of it as the most biased information. That reflects people's biases, because the number 1 page of Google is not Google deciding what the most relevant for your search is. Number 1 page of Google is deciding what other people have liked and wanted to read. So you're actually learning about other people's biases more than you're reading about the reality when you get your first page of Google results. I'll do some written analysis of celebrities, because there's all kinds of pages that tell us the Enneagram types of celebrities out there. So we can do this text analysis, see if it matches up. But, let's be, hardcore scientific engineering. Let's actually develop some computer models, because that'll be like the really convincing stuff. So let's develop a computer model and predict some amazing things about human behaviors. So I will get into the Myers-Briggs personality theory and see if we can predict these things in the human population with computer models. Designing control system personalities, I'm going to skip over that one for this presentation because you guys are going to take control systems next year. So if it was a 3rd year class, I would do it, but I will talk about describing how to build robots with personalities, which is what we want to do in this course, this course next year. So you're helping me set it up for next year. So first of all, let's look at these Google results. Number 1 page of Google for how to deal with these personality types. So I'm looking at how to deal with people. So we're looking at type 1, 7, versus how people deal with avoidant personality type versus how people deal with dependent personality types. So I'm taking these Google pages and I'm just taking all the text on the page and I'm dividing it up and categorizing it in one of these 4 different categories: manipulation, empowerment, emotion, or logic. And I'm saying what kind of personality comes across in this Google page talking about how to deal with this particular personality type. So I'm not looking at the personality type itself, I'm talking about someone dealing with that personality type. What personality are they conveying in such a page? So people who deal with 7s, avoidance, and dependence come across as quite similarly. They come across in the same quadrant. Same with type 1. People deal with type 1s in quite a similar way. So I can go through all of these, type 4s and type 2s. You get this kind of grouping of people kind of react to these people and deal with them with a particular kind of personality. Type 3s and type 8s also get quite a tight cluster of how people deal with them. And then type 5s and type 6s, again, you get this cluster of personality types of how people deal with these. So this gives me some evidence that people at least view these Enneagram types the same way they view the personality disorders. Okay, so even though people don't necessarily, people might be thinking negatively of the person with personality disorder and positively with the person with the Enneagram type, still they're treating them in a very similar way. So I do have some evidence that other people are agreeing with me, even if they're not putting it in my particular quadrant system. Let's look at Jesus. That's fun, right? So I plotted Jesus' personality type in each of the chapters in Matthew, and each chapter of Matthew is a number up there on the Jesus plot, and it shows you what personality type it comes across for Jesus. Now there was an existing hypothesis out there in a book that said Jesus balances all 9 Enneagram types. So when you take the Enneagram in a church workshop, because there's a lot of religious people who use this Enneagram workshop in terms of a spiritual tool, you will learn that Jesus balances all 9 Enneagram types. So I thought I'd test this out. So the overall resulting personality of Jesus is that blue asterisk just below the center. So Jesus did actually come out to be very close to being perfectly balanced, but not perfectly balanced. So a little bit off. So that means Jesus has a little bit of a personality comes across, but not really a human personality. So it didn't match up to one of the 9 personality types. I did explain this. I think this is actually the romantic hero personality type from literature, so a literary personality type. So I'm trying to prove that now. So it is kind of interesting anyway. It's a little bit fun. Let's plot out some angry women, so I can relate to angry women. So let's see what some of them are writing. So we get the upper right quadrant there. I was looking at Andrea Dworkin, who's kind of the most famous angry feminist of all time. So if you type in angry feminist into Google, you'll probably get Andrea Dworkin's writings come up. So I'm looking at 2 different ways that people are writing. So I'm looking at introspective writing. So people are just sitting down and have all the time in the world to write a little article, and they can think about what they're saying. And as long as it's kind of honest, authentic communication, then their self-image comes out, and I can kind of do this categorization on them. But I'm also looking at what I call the extrospective self-image. So what about in an interview when someone doesn't have time to think about what their answer is, they're having to come out right away and say what they think?